This podcast is with Rowena
Fratarcangelo.
She is the Vice President, Business Development for the Greater Richmond Partnership. Thank you for being here, Rowena.
Thanks for having me, Monique. Appreciate it.
And thanks for helping with your last name. I appreciate that.
I'm used to it.
So just to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about your background, your education, and kind of how you got into this work and what your expertise are?
Sure. It was a little bit of a windy path. My undergrad degree was in English, and I worked at the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond for about 9 years in their research department on a number of their quarterly publications. And I bought an old house in a transitional neighborhood in the city of Richmond, and it just got me interested in neighborhood dynamics. And so I decided to leave the bank and go back to school and study urban and regional planning here at VCU. And I went into it thinking I wanted to do something neighborhood level based, but the economic development classes were what really, really excited me. And shout out to Dr. John Accordino. And I just was really fortunate that when I graduated, there was an opening at the Greater Richmond Partnership.
So now can you tell us a little bit about what economic development is?
Well, it's one of those things where I don't know that there's one precise definition. It's basically any proactive process or programs that's going to help benefit, the economy. Mm-hmm. So from my perspective, I'm on the business attraction team. So we work to bring new companies to the Richmond region, and they'll create jobs and they're going to invest in the local economy. So that's going to bring, improve the whole economy overall.
Mm-hmm. And so how would you say Richmond sits compared to other similar sized cities when it comes to our economic development? Just success or just initiatives?
Well, we, in terms of successes, we have a lot going for us. We have it's been kind of an easy sell when we're talking to companies. Part of that is our great central location on the East Coast, right on the 95-64 corridor, the fact that we're the capital region of a very business-friendly state. We have really skilled, educated workforce, great quality of life, a lot of the things that companies are looking for in terms of being able to attract and retain workers. So people want to live here, so it's fairly easy to get people to come move here and work here. In terms of how we compare to similar sized cities, there are a number of metro areas about our size that we're pretty comparable on in terms of the cost of commercial real estate or the cost of utilities or that kind of thing. And where we really stand out is for Virginia being such a business-friendly state is Virginia's got some of the lowest workers' comp rates and lowest unemployment insurance rates in the U.S. And those are cost savings, can be significant cost savings for a company. Mm-hmm. And so even though if everything else being equal, when you're thinking, in Virginia it's 100 and something versus somewhere else it might be 600 per employee, that's a huge savings, and that's something every company pays.
Okay. So this course is a real estate development course. As we both know, real estate is about transforming space or land from one use to another. So what's the relationship from your perspective between real estate development, and economic development?
In my mind, they go hand in hand because you couldn't have one without the other. But specifically for economic development, when we're working with companies, the primary thing they're looking for is a physical location, whether that's office or warehouse or manufacturing space. And if those don't exist, or if we don't have a site in the region that they could build on, then they're going to look elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important for us to have the inventory that the types of companies that we're trying to recruit would be looking for.
And then, so from your perspective, what comes first? Are you kind of looking at companies or trying to attract companies, and then also kind of looking at what kind of space we have available to see if there's a potential match? Or is the goal just to attract, and then, as you attract, you kind of figure out that next step?
It's kind of both. There's, we certainly try and kind of maintain an awareness of what the available inventory is. Mm-hmm. So when we're going out and talking to companies, we can say, oh, we've got this available right now you might be interested in. So a new flyer comes in, we send it out to a company that we've been working with, anything to try and attract them and visit the region. There have been a couple instances, about 9 or 10 years ago, when Wachovia Securities was moving their base to St. Louis. Mm-hmm. And that freed up a lot of office space, but also there were quite a few workers who did not want to relocate to St. Louis. And so we did this proactive campaign where we went out talking to companies and said, hey, we've got hundreds of thousands of square feet of Class A office space in downtown Richmond that's coming available, and the workforce that would fit into those spaces. And so we tried to really. It was a sad thing to see them go, but we tried to really make something positive out of it. So it depends on the scenario and what type of company we're working with, whether our focus is on the real estate, right off the bat, or whether that comes a little bit farther down the line.
But it definitely sounds like there's a lot of strategy that informs how you engage with businesses, or just try to project what their needs are, what our potential opportunities are.
Exactly. And we try to maintain a good relationship with the commercial real estate community here, whether it's through Graker or Crew, and really, get to know the brokers so we can kind of let them know what we've been hearing. For the longest time, there was no spec space in terms of distribution facility, anything like that, and now we've got a couple different spec developments going on, and it's really exciting, and it gives us a lot to talk about when we go meet with companies.
And so do you think that that spec development, is that in response to some of these developers anticipating demand?
I think so.
Okay.
Based on the types of inquiries we would get with companies wanting, 500,000 square feet of space, or certain, buildings with a certain ceiling height if it's distribution. And we didn't have that. And after getting enough of those types of inquiries, I think it kind of really resonated that, within the development community, if they could be proactive about that could really reap some rewards. And I think there's been a lot of attention. So.
That's interesting. I mean, I didn't realize that there was that kind of fluid kind of relationship building and communication between your work and the commercial real estate industry. So that's neat to know.
We really try.
So do you perform any market analysis as a part of your business development? I kind of want students to understand what a market analysis is and how it informs economic development potentially and real estate development opportunities.
We do. We have a research team on staff, and they have done a tremendous job of gathering kind of the types of information that a company looking at the region would want to know. It's really the company's responsibility to do that, research themselves, but we want to help whenever we can. And that can be anything from just maintaining lists of companies that are in the region so they understand that there's a cluster there, which means the workforce is here, or it could be that they want to know specifics about our educational system, what our community colleges are like, or what our four-year universities are like, or what examples of where curriculum has been tweaked to fit the needs of a company in the region. We had a cluster analysis done a number of years ago to really help us fine-tune the clusters that we were going after, and that kind of showed us that we were on the right track, but also allowed us to tweak a little bit in terms of the really 7 different industry clusters that we target.
So can you kind of describe those 7 different industry clusters? What does that mean?
Sure. It's basically the industry clusters that are the strongest here fall into kind of 3 buckets. So sort of the office bucket, health, life science, bioscience, and then industrial. And so for the office bucket, it's corporate services, so headquarters, middle office, back office, IT, many of the cybersecurity, those type of things, and then finance and insurance. For bioscience, it could be health IT, it could be R&D, it could be medical devices. And then for the industrial side, it's advanced manufacturing and food and beverage and supply chain and logistics. So we know that if we're going out on a marketing mission, we want to meet with companies that fit in one of those target clusters. I mean, we'll assist. If a company comes to us and they don't fit neatly into any of those clusters, we still want to assist them, but it's a harder case to make because maybe they would be the first one in the region and maybe the workforce isn't completely ready for a company like that, or there might not be all the resources that they would need. But
I'm learning a lot, Rowena. So you'd mentioned kind of being strategic about what companies you target, even though you're open to helping others that don't fit that mold. So are there specific tools that you use? Like, how do you engage a company? Is it a cold call? How do you kind of begin building that relationship, and then what kind of information are you providing?
Yeah, we've got a number of ways of going about it. We do a lot of outreach marketing, so we go on a lot of marketing missions, both domestically and internationally. And we'll frequently hire a lead generation company to help us do that research and set those meetings up for us, because it's a tremendous amount of work. And they look at our target clusters and they do their research and look for companies that have been around for a certain amount of time, have a certain amount of annual revenue, certain number of jobs that might be looking to add an additional location, and the Greater Richmond might be a good fit. And then we go and meet with them. We get talk to them face to face and kind of hear their story and tell a little bit about Richmond and why we think it might be a good fit for them. And then ideally we invite them to the region and they come and visit, because that's when they really get a feel for everything that we have to offer here. I mean, we can show them numbers and we can show them cost comparisons, or just say, hey, we've got great universities. But it's when they come here and we customize an itinerary for them. So while they're here, depending on what their focus is, they might meet with local universities, they might meet with workforce professionals, they might meet with attorneys or accountants or bankers or that kind of thing, or it might be all real estate. So they might just want to go out and see what is space available, that kind of thing. And typically, luckily, they usually stay overnight, and so we're able to drive them around and just show them around and get them a feel for the region.
So do you find that any of these businesses, because you mentioned that they're trying to kind of get a sense of, or when they come visit or asking you questions, they're talking to other professional partners, they want to kind of see the real estate potentially, understand the workforce and the skill set of the folks. Are they also interested in just kind of the built environment of Richmond? Do you find that, are they thinking about it from the perspective of, is this a community that will attract talent? What kind of other resources do you have culturally, or just
absolutely
the demographics? Okay.
Yeah. And that's something, we've got a really great story to tell about that in terms of our quality of life. And quality of life can mean different things to different people, but I think one of the great things about our region is we have something for everyone. You think about the museums we have, the ballet, the Richmond Forum, the outdoor activities, the James River, the hiking, the bicycling, all sorts of things. We've got cricket, we've got soccer, we've got indoor volleyball. We really have anything somebody could want. And also, kind of part of that is the housing options. So if you want to live in downtown, if you want to live in the city, we've got urban options. If you want a kind of a suburb planned community, swimming pool in your neighborhood kind of thing, we've got that. And we've got rural options, and it's relatively easy to get around. We still have we're recognized as one of the least congested metro areas. I think that'll probably change eventually, but right now, we can honestly say that it's easy to get around, and there's a lot of things here that would help companies attract their workforce. And I know that Time Magazine recently ranked Richmond #2 in terms of attracting millennials. And
really?
That's a big deal. And companies keep, they're focused on that age group. But
wow, I didn't realize that. We're in a lot of these, national rankings.
Yeah. And best place to visit for beer tours and foodie cities and festivals, and lots of fun things. We can really tell a good story about, and the different, depending on the company, if it's an international company, we can introduce there's usually some sort of kind of international or ethnic community that they might be interested in. We can make those introductions, and anything that's going to make them feel like they would be a good fit and would be welcomed. And
it sounds like a very interesting position. Like we were saying, that I'm sure no day is ever the same.
It is not.
Now, you mentioned international companies. I'm just curious to understand why international companies would want a physical presence in the States, and then what is it that's probably having them gravitate toward Virginia in particular?
Sure. Well, one of the big things is, especially if we're really a product or a service, if they want to break into the U.S. market, they need a U.S. presence. If you're trying to sell something, and like say I want to buy their widget, and to answer a question about the widget, I have to call some overseas number with a whole bunch of, they're not as likely to get that customer base. And so more and more they realize they need a physical footprint here. A lot of times they choose Virginia because if you look on a map, our central location. But they do a little bit more digging, and they realize, we don't need to be in Boston or New York or Chicago or even Washington, D.C. We can be in Richmond, which is just 90 miles south, and yet at a much lower cost of doing business. And one of the benefits of being on the East Coast is, especially if the company is European, the time difference between the home office, say it's in the UK, and their office here is shorter. So there's an overlap of those work days. They better, ease of communication, more so than if they were in the Midwest or California, the West Coast. But we have a long history of attracting international companies, and so we've got over 200 firms in the Richmond region. I want to say it probably represents over 150 countries. UK right now is the largest percentage, and then Germany, then Japan.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
It is interesting.
Now, are these companies that, and this is just for me and my benefit, are they like customer-facing companies, or, because I'm just now kind of curious about who some of these companies might be, or are they more, they're companies that, you know, technology companies, or provide some good or service to other companies, so we as consumers don't necessarily engage with them directly?
Exactly. So some of them, a UK company that we worked with a few years ago, BGB Technologies, they're in Chesterfield County, and they make slip rings and different components for wind turbines. Now that isn't something that you or I are looking to buy, but it's that, you know, wind energy is becoming a bigger and bigger thing throughout the world, and so it was really advantageous for them to be in Virginia. They were servicing a client that was not in Virginia, but they knew that they could get to that client quickly from here. But so their customers are big companies, the companies that would build the wind turbines.
Okay. So now, I also noticed that you are a member of the Virginia Economic Developers Association.
Yes.
And I was looking at some of the membership, I guess, industries that some of the members come from, and it was pretty diverse. Utility, transportation, elected officials, you had engineers, construction folks, real estate folks. I'm just kind of curious about why are all those professions kind of connected through this association, since everybody is looking at the work from a different perspective. What's the value of having this association?
Well, I think the big value is economic development is just such a team effort. I mean, no one person does everything. You know, we may be the organization that goes out and brings the company here for its initial visit, but then they say they choose one of the other localities. Say they choose one of our 4 localities, and they decide, oh, we're going to build a building here. They'll need that local economic development office to act as the expert on that locality, and they do. All 4 of our localities do an excellent job at this, and they'll work with the prospect. Say they're building a building, so they're going to need to know things about construction, about permitting, about the utilities, whether it's electric, gas, whether they need rail. It's about kind of bringing all the people to the table who are going to impact that decision and making it progress as quickly as possible. And all 4 of our localities are really good at fast track processing, and that's where it pays to know, all right, who are the engineers in the area who can help with the core samplings of the land to see if, where the best place to build is, or where are the wetlands, or, that kind of thing. So it's really interesting because you're talking to people that we're all sort of do some aspect of economic development, even if that's not in our title.
Makes perfect sense. So now, can you tell us, Rowena, about a couple of the coolest projects that you've worked on? Anything that you can share or that you're working on?
Gosh, some of my favorites, still one of my favorites is Sabra. I was on the team that worked to bring them to Chesterfield County. That started out, I want to say, in March of 2008, and they initially were looking at existing buildings throughout Virginia. It was a state project. It came to us through the state. And pretty quickly realized there was nothing existing in our region that would work, and so we closed it. And then a couple months later, it reopened because they were willing to look for a build-to-suit. And so then they, narrowed it down on a site in Chesterfield County, and made an announcement. Actually, I think 10 years ago today. And then they opened up in 2010. And they've expanded, I think, 2 or 3 times. They have a center of excellence now. They do a lot of R&D. They're up to some like 700 people now, and they work with. They've recently started working with VSU for a community garden. And it's just so really neat. Number one, I love the hummus. I would have kept eating it even if they hadn't located. But it was just a really neat project. And part of that also, backing up, was it was a joint venture between PepsiCo and the Strauss Group. And the Strauss Group was a big food company in Israel. So it was really fascinating when the team from Israel would come in and just hearing about what some of their goals were and what some of their interests were and their company kind of culture was. It's really fascinating. I just love the fact that they're doing good work and they're really
engaged with the community.
Exactly.
So any others come to mind?
Well, I have to say CoStar as well. That's a product. It's a commercial real estate database, which probably most of your students would know that. But it's a product that we've used for years. And then when we were approached by a local broker who was representing them, and said, oh, they're looking, at 4 or 5 different metro areas. Can you help us? And I mean, we were excited because we knew what they were, which I think they started out as a code name, which that's another thing, confidentiality and code names and that kind of thing. But because labor force was so important to them, each of the localities that they were looking at, each of the metro areas, I should say, really had to prove that the workforce was going to be available. And so they had us all place blind ads on the different job boards, Indeed and Monster and ZipRecruiter, that kind of thing, and collect resumes and send them on to the folks at CoStar so they could really get a feel for, what type of workers are in the region, would they relocate, that kind of thing. And even though the other metro areas were twice our size, we were able to really help them build a case that the workforce was here. And of course, VCU, the real estate department, played a huge role in that. And they came down and attended one of the real estate trends conferences, and we're just really impressed with just the conference and the student volunteers and how professional they were and that kind of thing. And so, I don't know. And they're going to be a huge corporate sponsor for a lot of events and stuff in the Richmond region and continue to grow. So
wow, it's interesting to hear how that happens.
Yeah,
because you see the impact. We see CoStar in Richmond. I think there's like an endowed chair position at VCU that CoStar is seeding. So, but you don't really see all that happened in order for that to manifest. So that's kind of cool that you were involved in that.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. That isn't something that we've done for very many prospects before, and that was a really interesting process. But and then of course there was a whole lot of going on that I'm not aware of in terms of the brokers and the showing the space, and they just lucky to find the perfect building down right on the James River. And
wow, I kind of want your job, Rowena.
It's the coolest job I've ever had. It's really interesting. I've met some fabulous people. So it's a fascinating field, and it's something that even though my job is sort of at kind of the regional level, I feel good about the fact that we're working with companies, and once they make a decision for one of our 4 localities, the city, Hanover, Henrico, Chesterfield County, once they're in our region, they're benefiting the whole region. They're benefiting the whole MSA. And I feel good about that. So I don't always, once they've narrowed it down to a particular locale, then typically GRP steps back. And we're here to support in any way we can if needed. But typically then the local economic developers take over and work through the process. But still, it's really neat to know that, I've had a hand in, working on a team that has brought a company to the region that's created jobs and has,
So I do have a follow-up based upon that. So do all of the jurisdictions kind of let your company take the lead in engaging with these businesses, or do they also do it on their own, like do some legwork and try to do business attraction?
That's a really good question. In general, they pay us to serve that role. Okay. So we are a public-private partnership. So we get part of our funding from those 4 localities, and the other part from investors. So companies in the Richmond region that understand what we do and the importance of it, and want to support that and make it, help us have the funds to take the trips to meet with the companies and help attract them. But each of the 4 localities has their own economic development office. And there are a couple target clusters that they may have that we don't have as a regional group. And so they might, especially for the city and maybe the counties too, retail. That isn't something that we cover. So that might be something that they do on their own, or maybe just through one of their networking organizations, they hear of a lead and they pursue that lead. And they'll frequently, even if it's focused on one particular community, they'll frequently bring us in for support in terms of research, documents, any type of help that we can give them to help make the case.
Okay.
So,
okay. Yeah. Well, thank you, Rowena.
Oh, thank you.
We have learned a tremendous amount about economic development and its relationship also to real estate development. So with that, this concludes the video podcast.